Hey, before I kick off the podcast, I just want to shout out Next Door Clothing. Next Door, a clothing brand based out of Bondi in Sydney. They're making really nice jeans and shirts and hats. So go and check out their full range at nextdoorsydney.com. They're also artists, so you can go and check out a range of art. They put on rad parties, and I love what they're doing. So nextdoorsydney.com for the full range. Cool, man. All right. Okay, this is for Clementine and Otis. So if you're loving the podcast, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen to your podcasts, and leave a review. It just helps me to keep producing weekly episodes. Also, subscribe to the THT YouTube channel. We have some carefully selected, fully filmed and edited episodes by legendary skateboarding photographer Ryan Grant. Shout out to our sponsors. First up, our major sponsor is Indosol. You know, they make footwear from recycled motor vehicle tyres, but moreover, Indosol are leaders in environmentally friendly and conscious fashion. Indosol have distributors worldwide, so go to indosol.com, that's INDOSOLE.com, and use code THT for a discount. Get your pair and join the movement. Next up is Kingpin Skate Shop. Biggest bunch of legends that own that shop. Those guys are local, they're legit, and they just have like the most carefully selected skateboard brands, hardware, but especially shoes. So if you've got a shoe fetish, go to kingpinstore.com, that's KINGPINSTORE.com, and use code THT at checkout for a 15% discount and free shipping for orders over $25 Australian. And lastly, Crush Organics. They are the CBD products specialists. So they've got topicals and oils, and CBD products are officially legal in Australia, as they are in many parts of the world. So get on it, start improving your health and well-being. Go and do the research yourself. Like, CBD is an amazing natural supplement. It's helped me so much with like my sleep, recovery, and like just reducing feelings of stress and anxiety. So head over to crushorganics.com, that's KRUSHORGANICS.com, and use code THT at checkout for an epic 40% discount, fast shipping worldwide. All right, Jed, have you finished your enchilada?
Oh, man, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right, here we go. Terrible happy talks. Terrible happy talks. Whoa. Dude, I'm Go. 3, 2, 1. All right, let's do this. Today's guest is Jed Smith. Jed is a surfer, journalist, and co-host of everyone's favourite surf podcast, Ain't That Swell? It's a podcast that celebrates and challenges the full spectrum of surf culture whilst providing a commentary on current, issues in surfing and what's going on in surfing. It's the best. Whilst Jed's brand of larrikin humour is adored by his legion of fans, who I might add are affectionately known as Swellians, and yep, I like to think I'm a Swellian, Jed's article writing often courageously addresses socio-political issues with sharp intellect and logical rationale. Jed was a journalist and correspondent for Vice News Indonesia. He has written for every major newspaper in Australia, not to mention the best surf magazines on the planet. And currently, when he's not recording podcasts with co-host Vaughn Blakey, Jed is a full-time article writer for Stab Surf. No, sorry, not a full-time, part-time Stab Surfing magazine article writer. So this week, Jed is with me live from his home on the north coast of New South Wales, Australia, to share his journey, experiences, challenges, and hopes for the future. Mr. Jed Smith, welcome.
Well, thanks, Shan. Thanks for having me, mate.
Dude, I'm stoked on your time, but more importantly, I want to get straight into it. You made the Channel 7 news yesterday with the Irakanji theme song. Is this the pinnacle of your career so far?
Oh, mate, making mainstream breakfast television is definitely not the pinnacle of my career. If that was the pinnacle of my career, I'd be a very, very sad, bald little man like Koshi, but I'm not.
Koshi was the finance guy. I always find that funny. He was the finance guy, and then all of a sudden, his opinion matters on everything. It's really strange.
That revolving door between banking and journalism, it's just this kind of parasitic echelon of occupation, isn't it? Yeah. I don't know.
As a journalist, what's that?
Well, I just don't know why people who work in finance think they know anything about anything. Their job is literally about often, it contributes no quantifiable value to society, doesn't it? It's often even destroying value. It's in the business of destroying value half the time. Fucking weird gig, mate. Weird people. Weird.
Would you describe yourself as an independent journalist primarily?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not on the payroll of any mainstream news organisation in any permanent capacity. Is there an echo? Can you hear that? I can hear that.
I can't hear it. Let me try something. Hang on. You got an echo? What about now?
Yeah. Nah.
Is that still echoey?
Long. Thank God. I was driving.
Is that better?
Yeah.
So no echo?
No, all good.
I fucking hate remote podcasts. They every time I do one, they're just some sort of issue, echo or this or whatever.
No.
But anyway.
All good. I would be an independent journalist. Yeah, freelance journalist. I think it's pretty hard to work in those big mainstream news organisations without having to compromise on a lot of fucking just basic tenets of the profession, because they all have, they tend to have pretty dirty revenue streams, whether it be mining and resource companies, the property kind of industry. The Sydney Morning Herald gets a lot of money from Domain. They're kind of invested in property prices going up, and they're kind of pro gentrification. Every mainstream newspaper I know is like by default pro capitalism, which I think that's a bit odd, isn't it? Like, it doesn't matter if they're left or right. You're kind of getting two sides of the same coin when they're all pro this system. They all depend on the success of this system for their revenue stream. So I'm not saying I'm socialist or capitalist or anything, but I just think that's a little bit of a weird one.
Especially when I guess a lot of people put their faith in the information that is being fed to them.
Yeah, absolutely, and we can see now how much distrust there is in the media. This is just like it's like a farcical trade. Like, it's one of the most least trusted professions going, which is so ironic because the whole point of its existence is to give people truth. But yeah, it's been so corrupted by dirty revenue streams and big pharma, mining and resource, fucking the sugar industrial complex. That's a real sleeper. Gambling, fucking alcohol, just shit upon shit upon shit. Poison pills and rubbish. That's about all Western civilization and capitalism's got to show for itself at the moment.
Well, I'm glad we started the podcast on such a positive note. No, I'm just kidding. No, but do you think the average journalist who works for those mainstream media outlets actually, most would start with the best intentions in mind, right? I mean, how on the ground level, how are those journalists, I guess, in effect, influenced, or maybe how is their work polluted as they start to go along? That's what I always wonder.
Yeah, well, if you don't toe the line, you get fired. If you it's as simple as that. These people have mortgages and kids and families and financial responsibilities, so you got to do what you can't bite the hand that feeds. If you really the best journalists in the world, almost no one's ever heard of them, and I can rattle them off. That they are, fucking John Pilger, guy from Bondi originally. Actually, they are, Julian Assange, a guy who's locked up indefinitely. Glenn Greenwald, a gay guy who works for The Intercept and lives in Brazil, and his head is on the chopping block constantly. Like, I can't believe he's not dead. There's Maria Ressa from the Philippines, like this tiny, diminutive little chick who, is just standing up to the fucking most, like, unbelievable tyrants, just fearless. But, these people, like, to do it properly, not only do you have to often bite the hand that feeds, you got to be willing to pay with your life. It's psycho.
It is. Did you ever feel any of that pressure in your time?
Yeah, like a couple times. Like I was thinking the other day about when I used to write about property in Sydney. Like I grew up like with a single mum, like kind of on the breadline, renting. Like I probably lived in like 10 homes before I was 13, kind of thing. And housing, rent pressure, like inexplicable rent hikes, an out of control housing market. The eradication of social housing from the inner city and moving it to out west and shit. Like all these things I understood from a young age. So there was a point when I was writing about that a lot, and I realised that, like, you think you're writing about politicians, but actually, like, you're often writing about organised crime. Like, the mafia runs concreting, and, like, they run the concrete, and you're fucking with powers that you don't really understand. And I remember kind of realising at one point, wow, like, part of the Sydney folklore, especially when you work in the media, is what happened to Juanita Nielsen, the ABC. I don't know who she worked for. I can't remember. She was a journalist in the 70s, writing about the gentrification of King's Cross, and they just killed her. Like, they never found her body. I think everyone thinks it was Abe Saffron and what is his name, Mr. Sin or whatever, Mr. Sin City, and the gangster from Bondi and his mate Jim Anderson, allegedly. That's what kind of said in inner city Sydney circles. But she died for a job, and so when I was writing about that same shit, a couple of stories, I just took my name off them. So I was like, fuck, you know what, like, this isn't worth going down over.
Wow.
So, yeah, and then in Indonesia and shit, you had to be real careful. I wouldn't do that again. Like, some of the risks I took there. I've since seen stories. I think there's a guy, maybe he's an Aussie kid who's doing like 5 years over there at the moment, just for, fuck all really, like less than what I was writing about over there. But if you want to write about any kind of corruption or, which is essentially what journalism is, almost, the good stuff's almost always about, tends to be, you follow the money and you find you can corrupt people at the end of it. So he got done doing that, and like, yeah, I wouldn't. Fuck, man, I don't know. You can kind of only live there as a Westerner. You can't really work there as a journalist, especially if you don't have a working visa, which I didn't have.
Wow, and you were working for like a pretty well respected outlet as well, like Vice Media. I think. Can you just go into a little bit? And maybe for those that are interested in following a similar path, like, what does one have to do to find themselves in a job like that in a foreign country? Did you apply for it, and what was the appeal for you?
Like, I had already worked for quite a few years freelancing for Vice, and I just hit up the Vice Australia kind of director or chief or whatever his title was, and was like, who's your guy in Indonesia? And he just put me onto him. But, by that stage, I'd already written for a lot of newspapers, a lot of surfing magazines, and I've been working in community newspapers and radio since I was 15.
Amazing.
So that's the pathway, yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about surfing and the media. So I've noticed, obviously, you've been very, very vocal on social media about, and supportive of our Australian surfers in the Olympics recently. Like, it's been epic, and to watch Owen take down Medina in the Olympics, and it's pretty special. So how do you feel the mainstream media are doing at presenting surfing to the world at the moment in the Olympics? What's your thoughts on it?
I think they did a good job in terms of the broadcast on the Olympic surfing. I thought, like, Barton Lynch, the 88 world champ from the north side of Sydney, he's like the best commentator in surfing by a mile.
He's
and
great,
the other bloke, the geezer, the Pommy bloke, like, he did a good job. I thought all that was good. I thought the whole spectacle was pretty sick. I don't know about what Channel 7 or Channel 9 or was saying apart from what I watched on the broadcast, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it that much, but I got into it. I had my little fucking green and gold cap on. I was fucking, and I'm not usually going into that nationalist shit that often, but
I was the same. I had been quietly skeptical about that, and especially the skateboarding, because skateboarding's always been my first. Fuck, it was sick. Like, again, I was completely skeptical because, I mean, when I was a little kid skating 25 years ago, we used to joke about it and go, oh, imagine skateboarding was in the Olympics one day. And, you know, when I heard it was going to be the Olympics years ago, it was like, oh, wow. And then I was like, and then there's been a lot of, you know, sort of conversation about, you know, is it good for skating, bad for skating? But I must admit, as soon as it started, I was like, yes. And I'm like screaming at the TV. And I actually think they did quite a good job in the commentary. So they got like some legit skateboarders who knew what they were talking about to commentate. I think the actual production was beautiful, and the skate setup, the actual skate park was so good, the street setup. And I also, sorry to talk a lot here, Jed, but I also felt like
I didn't actually know they had a street setup and a street fucking metal. That's classic.
Well, they had a proper street setup. So the skaters would, you know, I don't know if you've seen a similar thing in the States. It's called Street League. It's a big skate comp in the States, but they just did it really professionally. And, you know, they didn't try and dumb down the tricks. They were calling the skate tricks exactly what they were and what skaters would call them, and sort of getting the public to get on board as opposed to trying to dumb it down for the public, which I really loved. So they had the street competition last week, and they got the park comp, which is more the bowl skating. That's next week. And Kieran Woolley, who's a young Australian skater from Wollongong, where I'm from at the moment, he's going to be in it. So it's super exciting on that front for me. But
anyway. Fuck yeah. No, that's super interesting. The way they integrate these kind of subcultures into the mainstream and make it work. Like, yeah, I mean, why not? Like, I can't see a downside to it. It's just fucking like, I think a lot of people are complaining about, you know, the potential of it blowing surfing out, but like, you know, I don't think that's really a danger happening. The waves are pretty shit, and you know, it was just sick. I spoke to Owen today for our podcast. We interviewed him, and you know, he was in tears. He was in tears just recounting the whole journey. You know, in particular, watching his teammate Sal Fitzgibbon lose. So, it really affected the athletes to a large degree, and I think a lot of the people back here kind of felt that. And yeah, I think it was just a pretty strangely exhilarating thing to behold. And fucking thank God Australia won a medal, mate, because like if we didn't, like, it'd just be outrageous considering how much we've achieved in surfing. We've pretty much dominated the competitive format for fucking decades until now. So in the first ever Olympics, not to get a medal would have just been a travesty. But fuck, we got it done. Up the big O's.
Owen, did you love how? I mean, I personally loved how he mentioned TBI and his traumatic brain injury in his post-heat interview.
Oh, did he? I didn't catch it.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. I mean, considering anyone that knows what he went through with his brain injury, and then, you know, like when he won Snapper after that, and then now the Olympics and beating, you know, probably one of the best surfers of our generation, Gabriel Medina.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know, man. I must admit, I teared up. You know, I was just like, because he's such a nice guy. I mean, he's just a special human.
He's a nice guy. He's been through a lot. He's a very, you know, what you see is what you get with that guy. He's just a down to earth classic. Yeah, they're a classic family, really. Just, you know, all from that Culburra, South Coast part of the world, which is pretty roots, pretty blue collar and classic. And yeah, I've got a lot of time for all of them.
I've noticed in some of the work you do, Jed, you do address the issue of like brain injury. Is there any particular reason why that's close to your heart, or do you just find it interesting?
I had a ton of them, like playing football and fighting and just being an idiot when I was younger. I had also a really bad injury surfing, fractured skull, a bit of bleeding like near the brain. I had to operate and drain the blood and shit. So I've had a crazy history of that, probably like 12 serious concussions, everything from breaking my jaw to fracturing my skull, and
wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been feeling it too the last few years, like feeling every one of them. It's been gnarly, actually trying to survive all that shit. And I've been nuts.
Would you mind describing how you've been feeling it? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, just like it's kind of hard to separate from some damage from the way I was brought up and the environment I was brought up in, but like the anxiety, like pretty chronic anxiety, like probably erratic moods, like irritability, like poor impulse control, or maybe not poor impulse control as much as like intense impulses, like emotional impulses that you're not able to fucking get a handle on, but all of a sudden you're suffering so much that you can't contain it and you take it out on people around you, not in bad ways, but in ways that are enough for people to think that you're arrogant or that that you're often, but it's actually just like you just don't have the energy to fucking communicate in that moment, and that moment's a lot for me, has been. So yeah, I try and I'll do a lot of Wim Hof. I do that every morning, the Wim Hof breathing method. I do 40 minutes to an hour of meditation, CBD oil, microdosing, and I'm just reading the book, The Concussion Repair Manual by Dr. Dan Engel, who's been on the Joe Rogan podcast, and learning a lot about the various methods there are for healing the brain. And, I'm making headway, and I feel, pretty good at the moment, actually, better than I've felt in a long time. I think I've the psilocybin has really helped me build like an emotional awareness and emotional intelligence where I'm able to still working like on empathy. I think I'm still working on all of it. Try not to be as self-absorbed and wrapped up in my own suffering and victim mentality. All of that, the real process, man. Like I lived for so long with, terrible problems with anger and, a victim of violence and a perpetrator of violence. So it's hard to undo all that wiring, and it's a process, yeah. But all these things, like they call it stacking, like you stack fucking all of these methods on top of each other, and it's like a cascading effect. And and we're living in a fucking golden age of biohacking and self-help information through podcasts, and that cannot be underestimated. Like the revolution, if it happens, will happen internally first, and it is happening internally. Through the Andrew Huberman podcast and Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss. These guys are leading this insane revolution in people's health and well-being, and it's fucking exciting, and I'm benefiting from it. I can't believe it. It's crazy. I'm fucking sweating bullets, man. I got the meat sweats from this chicken enchilada. I got the fire boiling.
How is the enchilada? It looks good, bro.
It was good, yeah. It was
have you finished it?
Yesterday's news, but still good, yeah.
Well, man, listen, like, oh my God, like everything you're saying, I mean, I'm just resonating with on so many levels. I mean, I definitely don't want to talk too much about myself, but, I literally just, everything you were saying, I just was like, yep, that happened to me. My childhood was similar, And, I'm in my 40s now, I'm 44, and I'm at this stage in my life where I'm starting to ask these big questions, Some people might call it a midlife crisis.
Nah, dude, 44. That's a fucking, what do they call that? It's a master number. 11, 22, 33, 44.
Is it?
Yeah, it is like, I reckon...
bullshit.
All master numbers, there's a fair bit of, kind of cosmic resonance to all of that shit, man. Like, every time I see a master number anywhere in fucking life, like whether it's the battery percentage on my computer or phone, like I feel like I'm on track. It's like
No way.
And I actually think 33 was the most important year of my life. It was, you know, I mean, this is the age at
Why?
which, well, because I chose life and I fucking committed and worked at staying alive. And, you know, fuck, man, it's been so hard. But, yeah, I'm there. I'm doing it to actually choose life, to know what that means, to have to make that choice and fucking work as hard as I did just to keep my place on planet Earth. Like, it's fucking gnarly, man. And that's what happened when I was 33. So, I think 44 is going to be an incredible year for you.
Thank you, bro. But
if you're asking big questions, that means you're on track, because, you know, if you ask the questions, you get the answers, and you'll know what to do with the answers. Like, so keep asking the big questions.
See, I was born on the 22nd as well.
Oh, that's always a
and
good
my
day.
birth year, and my birth year is 77. You know, and my first name's got a double N, and I always want, and then my surname's also got doubles in it as well. And I always wonder, like, it just seems a bit too coincidental to have so many doubles in your life. And you're the first person to ever say to me, hey, there's something about those numbers. I didn't expect the conversation to go this way, but fuck.
Nah, well, I don't know, man. Like, last year I was looking into I was just looking into the importance of everything, I guess. But, like, I don't know, like, I always kind of knew 33 had some, like, resonance to it. And I looked into it deep, and I'm like, whoa, this is trippy. Like, 33 is the age at which Jesus died and was resurrected. It's the age at which Muslims, or like certain Muslims, believe you exist at eternally in heaven, 33. It's the number of Hindu deities, 33. Yeah, I feel like there's one more, but I've forgotten it.
Fuck?
Yeah, it's trippy, man.
So I just want to go back a little bit, Jed, because you mentioned before, you said, I was in a position where I felt like I had to choose life. Now, for me as an outsider in your life who doesn't really know, we never know what goes on internally in someone. But for me, I see a very successful man that I'm really inspired by. You know, I love your writing. You're an amazing writer, but also, I mean, your podcast is just amazing, and you've got so many people who love that. And I really feel like it complements, especially Australian surf culture, so well. And it's created a community, especially, you know, with all those live broadcasts that you do. It brings people together. You know, for me, I see that as being a really successful human. But you don't see that?
I don't know. Like, well, weirdly, it hasn't translated into money for the most part. So,
damn it, really?
Yeah, people often think that I'm successful because I'm visible, but, like, financially, that's not been the case. And I mean, you know, money is a fucking serious pressure on my life, and it has been since the year of my birth. Like, you know, it's just part of what it's like growing up with a single mum, and I wouldn't mind, like, not being under financial pressure and being able, to just live in a housing situation that's more my own. I never wanted to be visible. Like, I didn't really want to do the live fucking podcast, to be honest. Like, I just thought it was
Everyone loves it.
stressful as fuck, man. Like, being up there in
it?
front of hundreds of people. Fucking oath, yeah.
It's so funny, though. You make people so happy, bro.
Well, that's why I do it. I do it for other people's sake, because I can see how much people enjoy it, and that's enough for me to do something, you know. But it's not something I'm naturally set up for. I'm learning. I'm 1 or 2 years into it, really. Like, 2 years, I guess. Like, I never did any public speaking before that. So, and yeah, I don't know, man. Like, journalism's frustrating. Like, I don't get to write the stories I want to write. I can write them for the surfing media because, you know, they're fairly independent. And my boss at at Stab Sam's really great with me and like respects my knowledge and experience, but working for the newspapers was such a thoroughly disenchanting experience. It fucking wigged me out. Oh.
How old were you when you realised that you had an inclination to want to write? Was that something that sort of touched you at a young age?
No, man, it kind of went like this. Like when I was a little kid, I was football mad, and I was just like, I want to be a football commentator when I'm older, you know, and just get paid to watch rugby league. And it was like I want to be a pro footballer, and that probably would have happened if I didn't fracture my skull when I was 12. And then my mum was always like, "Oh, well, you should have a plan B," and that was going to be a rugby league commentator. And then she goes, "If you want to do that, you got to do sports journalism or whatever." And so that was the goal. But to be honest, like one of the big motivating forces for me to get where I got was just growing up on my uncle's building site. He was a fucking legend. Love my uncle to bits, but he was a slave driver, dude. It was heavy. And I just wanted to get as far away from job sites as I possibly could. And I think that's ultimately what landed me in the media. And I think that's the case with most people who work in the media. They're just all trying to avoid being part of the working class and actually fucking contributing.
Dude, I was hoping for some inspired story like you were.
Bourgeois, bro. I think that's what they call them.
Bourgeois or bougie. That's the. It's interesting because I was thinking you're going to give me some inspired story, like you met some epic mentor or teacher when you were a kid who inspired you to write poetry, or something like that. But you're like, no, I just want to get the fuck off the job site.
That's it, and that was the biggest blessing because number one, like no job in my life has compared to how hard those earlier years were. Everything's kind of been a cakewalk. And also, like, it taught me so much about the world, like, just about, like, how hard working class people have to work, how monotonous it is, how, like, soul-destroying, monotonous and backbreaking it all is. I have immense respect for working class people, the things they put themselves through purely to put food on the table for their families is incredible, and pay mortgages off and shit. Their bodies get treated as if they're machines in this economy. Like there's no breaks given based on people's physiological needs. You just fucking work your slot out and make as much money as you can and pay your mortgage off and pay for fucking everything that never seems to get cheaper. It only ever goes up. So yeah, just actually understanding the plight of working class people, and that cuts across all the fucking colours and genders and sexualities and nationalities and shit. Like all that shit's irrelevant, man. Job sites are all the fucking same. There's all kinds of people on there. No one gives a fuck if you're from Vietnam or Lebanon or you're Polynesian or Aussie or whatever. What matters is if you can put up a straight wall, if your scaffolding's not going to fall over, if you can fucking paint well, that's what matters. And like all the like identity politics, all that shit, like there's not a conversation that mixed race building sites have, and they're all mixed race. Like in South Sydney where I grew up anyway. And coming out of that, like I had all I did was I hated fucking when I was younger, I just hated politics. And I just thought it was all a sham and it was all bullshit. I was part of that apathetic slave class who thinks it's all fucking rigged. And I went into the journalism thing just kind of like a total blank slate. I didn't know anything. I was afraid to even open my mouth for the first year I was at university. I started when I was 17. Everyone there was like mature age, like so educated and shit. I was like going to play fucking football on Friday nights, like after class. Like I was such a fish out of water, but because of that, I brought no ideological dogma into it. I was neither left nor right. I just had a very basic sense of kind of working class values, which is, fucking work ethic. Everyone should have certain basic things like housing and access to certain things, that like a sense of fairness and work ethic. Like, but and I just fucking hated scabs. Like, I just hate and politicians, bankers, and journalists are some of the biggest fucking scabs I've ever come across, man.
Thank you for saying that, and I think that is so healing for so many people to hear. As a fan of your podcast, and I can only speak for myself, is your authenticity resonates to me when you start discussing these kind of issues. Do you think that's been a contributor to the success of Ain't That Swell?
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, it's been a tricky one.
Do you want to become a champ? Do you want to become a champion of the working class? Because let's face it, like, generally Australia's a working class society, and a lot of surfers are from the working class.
Yeah. Every society is a working class society, because if you didn't have a working class, there'd be no fucking
middle class.
There'd be no pyramid scheme. They underwrite the productivity, but then there's these people who just skim off the top and provide nothing in return. And ironically, they're the richest, most powerful people in the fucking capitalist, colonialist Ponzi scheme.
Yeah. So, middle class. I love it, dude. It's beautiful. But I just think my question to you is, like, do you have an innate desire to become a champion of the people?
No, not at all. Like, what I realised...
Sorry to cut you off, Jed, because I see that in you. That's why I was drawn to you, because I know it seems like you put on a certain persona with the podcast in terms of, like,
comedy.
This comical larrikin.
Yeah.
It's satire. I get that. But still, your authenticity and your understanding, especially of surfing, like, because like surfers know if someone's really a surfer or not. That's obvious. But when you start to discuss these themes, I start going, yeah, fuck yeah. Like, I feel myself saying that, and I think a lot of other people do.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is, like, where I see my role is that, so few working class people get a voice and get a job in the media. It's so rare, and it's set up that way, man. Like, there's an incredible book written by Rick Morton, this Aussie journalist, and another guy from a pretty kind of low income background, and it's called 100 Years of Dirt. It won a slew of prizes and awards. It's really good, but he drags out this study that was done in the UK, I think, and the study, I'll quote the stats. I'll never forget the stats, although they might be like a decimal point off. But it's like the biggest drop in social mobility in any industry occurred in the media. I think in 1955 there was what was it, I think, the average broadcaster or journalist came from a family that earned like 5% above the national average wage. And by 1970, it was like the average journalist or broadcaster came from a family that earned if it wasn't like high 30%, it was like 70% above the national average. So in the 70s, you're talking about, the average journalist is like upper middle class. That's the 70s. Like, what is it now? I mean, when Donald Trump talks about media elites and shit, he's fucking bang on. He's bang on. And it's a sad thing to have to acknowledge that. But yeah, he was spot on. And working class people know it deep down. They know that they are being led around by a bunch of elites in the finance and media industries, and they're angry about it. And that's why we're in the state of affairs we're in, with people ransacking Capitol Hill and whatnot.
Well, what's the solution? Is more action required?
The solution is working class solidarity. It's the same solution that's been around since fucking the labour and union movements were invented. But instead we're having these warped backwards conversations about identity politics. And we're trying to achieve equality through fucking means that are just like token at best. Equality is achieved through through money in the hands of poor and working class people, man. Poverty is not a lack of character, it's a lack of cash, as they say.
That's great. I guess for me personally, I feel like, and I don't want to sound militant here, in Australian society we enjoy a good standard of living, and I think people are very scared to rock the boat, and I think there can be levels of complacency. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's it's not in our cultural DNA to really rock the boat. Like, in America, they've had a civil war. In France, they've had revolutions where rich cunts had their fucking heads cut off, like that happened. And they know it and they remember it and they remind the power that that's what happened, and they do it, every May Day, every whatever day they have days of the calendar, when they all, just remind the power, where the power really is and what can happen when things go pear-shaped for the people. And that's healthy. That's really healthy. Protest is, the people's way of conversing with the power.
Well, it is. I mean, in a democracy, that's all we have, really. So, yeah, I don't know. I think you're just amazing points. Like, and I agree with you if we go back a fair way in what you were saying about, I think there's a real cultural paradigm shift. There's a lot more discussion about people, like you were talking about biohacking, and people who have a genuine desire to make change within in order to change the world. And I mean, I don't know, numerous philosophers have said that over the years, like if you want to change the world, you have to start with yourself and things like that. I really do believe it. And I think there's this paradigm shift, and people are looking and seeking ways to tap into this innate desire to make change with themselves because they feel unhappy. And these methods of, I know you mentioned microdosing, you mentioned the use of, we're talking natural products here or supplements. And I noticed in your podcast you introduced yourself as the 2-time Cone Piece award-winning surf journalist and the Sultan of psilocybin. And often I used to think, that's part of the satire, part of him building his character. But I mean, do you stand by those representations that you put out there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't rip as many cones anymore. Like, I'm just more of a casual toaster. I got my little hashish joint going right here. I might even spark up if that's okay with you, Shannon.
Dude, you wouldn't be the first one to spark up on the podcast.
all that shit.
But you're not trying to hide. You're not trying to hide it, are you?
No, people in my family were pot smokers, man. They were hard-working people. They never really drank much. Like, my mum and dad anyway, they were both tokers and, plant medicines and herb. Like, this shit's fucking largely benign in the scheme of things. Like, it's not totally benign. I think weed, it is a powerful sacrament and should be treated with respect. But, man, if ripping cones and going surfing is your thing, well, fucking good luck to you, pal. You're on a good one. Like, that ain't bad. Like, there's almost nothing better than getting ripped and doing exercise of any description. So, like, I mean, I got no problems with it. It's a deep part of the cultural lineage of surfing, the bonghead, surfer fucking, that's a classic, an archetype that exists at every beach the country over. And some of those people were great people. They probably didn't amount to become bankers or fucking politicians or journalists, but I mean, that's a good thing, or maybe it's a bad thing. Maybe they should be running the country.
Maybe. And I just want to. There's a book I read last year by Michael Pollan. You probably read it.
Yeah, I love that guy.
Yeah, and it was called How to Change Your Mind, The Science of Psychedelics. Have you read that?
Yeah,
I mean, what I loved about that book, obviously he does a research study into the use of plant medicines in terms of, I guess, neurological rewiring. But what I really found intriguing about that book is how much it ties into deep American politics and propaganda, and it goes into that as well.
Yeah.
And that, for me, that was the aspect of the book that really, really got me thinking about maybe the importance of questioning the status quo. And that's what I loved about that book. I don't know. And he's just released another one called This Is Your Mind on Plants, where he does a research study into plant-based diets. You know, and some people might say, oh, that's some woo-woo shit and new age. But I'm just kind of like, well, the current methods of healing aren't really serving and working for a lot of people.
Oh, man.
You know, being addicted to pharmaceutical sedatives for the rest of your life, it's just not working out. People are still miserable. People are still depressed. People are still sad. I don't have any answers to it personally, but I guess I just like to talk about it and get other people's opinion.
Yeah, I mean, another really good journalist I didn't mention, who's in that pantheon alongside, you know, Pilger, Assange, Snowden, Greenwald, and Pollan, although he's a bit of a different kind of degree. He's a different kind of genre, but it's Adam Curtis, the BBC documentary maker.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And, fuck, he's good, man. And a lot of his films deal with the rise of the pharmaceutical industrial complex, like the invention of Valium, the invention of the DSM, the diagnostic manual that's used as the justification to prescribe pharmaceuticals to people. And it's shocking to realise that this empire is based on the fucking most often fraudulent, shaky scientific foundations. And, you know, it kind of, I don't know, like it was never designed to be a solution. It's a Band-Aid at best, and it often, you know, runs its course. Like, you know, any drug that you take, especially if it's a benzo or an opioid, it changes the shape of the brain to the point that your brain then needs it to, you know, function from there on. You know, and for someone like me, like a lot of my problems are just from head knocks, and like they haven't invented a pill to fix that yet, but they could have, you know, they tried to medicate me for bipolar, or like didn't try to, but they suggested, oh, maybe you should try some mood stabilizers. Maybe you've got bipolar. Maybe you know, you can get on the antidepressants. I could have got on anxiety medication. Any of it. Anyone can go to a GP any day of the week and say I'm feeling anxious, and they'll like write your script for Valium or Xanax or whatever it is. But I didn't, because you know, through my journalism and whatnot, like I don't trust the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm so vindicated by that decision, because the deeper I've gone into this kind of healing journey, I've, you know, I've begun to understand like that, you know, the things that I'm suffering from are complex PTSD and brain injury, and those two things, like there's not medications available for them. There's therapies and treatments, but if I had just taken a medication, that would have just been another fucking problem that I had to deal with. It would have just made my passage out of this even more arduous, you know?
Oh, bro, seriously, thanks so much for sharing that, dude. Like, I mean, it's just hearing you say that with honesty is actually it sort of makes me feel like better or something inside. And I reckon a lot of people hear that and feel the same. I mean, I know friends that have been addicted to anti-anxiety medication, and then they said trying to get off the anti-anxiety medication was way harder than having anxiety in the first place, you know.
Mate, benzos are, you know, I learnt this in a story I've written called, you know, The Dark Side of the Lucky Country for News Limited, which, you know, anyone can Google up. But, you know, benzos are the hardest thing to get off. They're harder to get off than opioids. And they've prescribed willy-nilly. Like, fuck, man, like people, you know, they're putting 16-year-olds on this shit, you know, and their brain's still developing. What's his face? Jordan Peterson, you know, Jordan Peterson?
Yeah.
12 Rules of Living, you know, like
amazing.
Bit of a fuckwit, I reckon. But anyway, you know, he ended up in rehab for benzo addiction after his wife died, and after writing this grand opus about how you should live your life, in which he's dismissive of Buddhism and meditation and smoking weed. And next minute he's fucking holed up in a Russian rehab center, paying for himself to be in an induced coma to cure his benzo addiction like a common drug addict. a wealthy
didn't know
common
that.
drug addict. Yeah. Doing this experimental procedure in Russia. So fuck, it can happen to the so-called best or the self-appointed best.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a big conversation, and I feel like we could just talk, a lot about it. Yeah, and I just want to, I'm going to fan out a little bit because I want to talk to you about Ain't That Swell one more time. I want to just pick your brain a little bit about, if you have to reflect on that journey, who are some of your favorite guests, or what are some epic moments that really stand out for you so far with the podcast?
I reckon the most classic live show was not the very first one we did. It was one of the first ones we did with Slater and Oki at Torquay Bolo. Fucking so funny. It was just classic. We just ambushed Slater with shenanigans, and he didn't know how to cop it, but and he didn't cop it very well at the start. And it was interesting without having to say a word. The crowd kind of, in a sense, taught him a lesson just through their energy, and they were just like, mate, don't fucking get down off that pedestal real quick. Get down here and enjoy the shenanigans. That's what this culture is about, is taking the piss, laughing at yourself. If you're going to put people down, you put yourself down at the same time. All things which are largely foreign to him and probably to Americans, a lot of Americans in general. So that was just so classic, and he fucking loved it, man. By the end of the night, he hung around at the bowl. He's there at Torquay Bolo, just afterwards. No one really gave a fuck that he was there, but he was just hanging out, waffling on with, Vaughn or whoever else he knew there, and he was one of us. He was just a part of the organism of humanity, which he seldom has got the chance to experience in his entire life. He's been frothed on since he was 12. The other thing was this interview we did with the most fucking the best US presidential candidate, and a chick who was on the track to fully go the distance and win the US presidency, Tulsi Gabbard. She's been on Joe Rogan twice.
Yeah. Was she on the Ain't That Swell?
Yeah, we did a 40-minute interview with her once. In the lead up to the election, when it was all pretty shit. And
that one.
We went off the deep end too. I was throwing the gnarliest curveballs I could at her, confident that she would answer correctly, and she did. She smacked them out of the park. But there's not a leader in the world that I have more respect for than her. Although Anthony Albanese, camper down household guy, rent striking veteran, I have a lot of respect for that guy, man. I think he'd be a great leader too.
Amazing. Yeah, I didn't know you had Tulsi Gabbard on. I mean, I listened to her episode on Joe Rogan, but I must have missed that one. I'll have to go back and listen to it. That's so epic.
Yeah, we had her, and actually on that same episode, Jodie Cooper, and she's another of the all-time great guests we've had. One of the greatest stories in Australian sport, the greatest untold stories in Australian sport. This was a long time before that incredible film Girls Can't Surf came out. And I loved having her on there. And she reminded me so much of my mother, both tough working class chicks from the bush, real that brand of feminism where it's, that they don't talk about it, they just do. They're just what women can't do this, fucking watch me. And I have so much respect for that attitude. I'm about action and more so than words.
Would you say your mother was someone that always supported you in your passions?
Oh, 100%. She was so incredible in that respect. We didn't have money. So that was never the focus. If you don't have money after a while, you just kind of write it off and you don't want to give it any power over you. So she was just just do what you want to do, follow your dreams. It's all that matters. And no pressure on me to do anything but what I wanted to do. And she encouraged that. She nurtured whatever I was interested in. And that was, what more can you ask for?
Yeah, man, that's so special, bro. I want to ask a couple of basic questions. How old were you when you started surfing? What beach did you learn how to surf at? Shit like that.
Like 11, 12.
Yeah.
The eastern suburbs, Bondi primarily. Like we moved to Bondi when I was 13.
Okay.
And yeah, that was, I was in the board riders there. I grew up surfing there. Like football was my primary focus because I thought I could make a career out of that. But, surfing was what I did in all of my other spare time.
Man, so amazing. You've really got me thinking about the brain injury stuff because when I was a kid, I think I was 11 or 12, I dropped in on a vert ramp on my skateboard and I was so little. I was like always a little kid. And I had a helmet on and pads and everything, but I collided with someone who dropped in on the other end, and it was like a 10-foot vert ramp. Wow. And I hit him at full speed, and he was like a man. Wow. And I remember it was my first proper brain injury. I had a helmet on, but it knocked me out cold, and I don't recall the 2 minutes leading up to the moment. So all I remember is like climbing up the ladder at the back of the ramp. And I don't remember standing on the platform. I don't remember putting my board over the edge. I don't remember dropping in. Like it wiped out 2 minutes before that, and then I had another accident on my bike when I was about 15 or 16 and I didn't have a helmet on my pushy, and I had a plastic bag on the handlebars and it went in the front wheel in the spokes and went head over heels and got knocked out again. And I often wonder what the long-term ramifications of those injuries were or are, and you were mentioning irritability, things like that, maybe frustration at times, maybe difficulty with relationships. I don't know if you've suffered from that stuff, but it was really big for me. So I just want to say thanks for getting me thinking about it. And I'm going to go on a bit of a research mission.
Yeah, well, there's a lot out there. I mean, Joe Rogan's been really good on that front. Got a great episode with Dr. Mark Gordon and this other bloke, an ex-veteran. He's done, I'm just trying to think, the ones with Dan Engle, Dr. Dan Engle are really good.
Oh, check that out. Cool.
And Dr. Dan Engle's book. So, there's a whole wormhole. There's the Faces of TBI, which stands for Traumatic Brain Injury. That's a podcast series. Anything involving Dan Carbon Castillo, Cillo, is really good. He's an ex-NHL player who's got a lot of expertise in healing from brain injuries, and he's on the plant medicine trip like hard. Like he's a guy who microdoses, uses a lot of CBD oil, meditates and does mushroom ceremonies sporadically. Whenever the demons are coming back and the suicidal thoughts are coming back, he knows to take himself off and do a mushroom, ceremony and just reset himself. Like, how legendary is that? And it's working for him,
Yeah, one of my past guests is he's a psychologist, but he's also in the Australian research team for psychedelic assisted therapy. And I just keep hearing these days the term psychedelic is coming up over and over, more and more. You're just hearing everyone talk about it. But to hear him talk about it as a clinical psychologist for 20 years, he said you get to a point as a psychologist, you get so tired of seeing the same people come in and out. It's a revolving door. And, they're not really they make progress to certain degrees, but then, just you see them come back. And he said, he must admit people who have done in their own time, had a psychedelic experience and then they come back and they couple that with therapy. He said that was when he's seen the major, life changes in those individuals where they were breaking the cycle and they were breaking the habits and you could tell their wiring was different. And I just find it really intriguing that, one or two experiences can actually do that for a person as opposed to a lifetime of medication. It almost sounds inconceivable, right?
Totally, man. Yeah, I mean, the psychedelic assisted therapy is incredible. But I think a lot of the movement is occurring right now around MDMA assisted therapy. And the stats they're getting with regards to PTSD, which is exceedingly common and, has a host of, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's so common, amongst veterans, amongst frontline, healthcare workers, AMBOs, cops, firemen, and just the general population, anyone who's been to prison, anyone who's suffered like any kind of abuse growing up, victims of violence, blah, blah, blah. It's so common. Being in a car crash, bad car crash will do it to you. And MDMA,
Totally.
yeah, there's some great podcasts there, Joe Rogan and Rick Doblin, Tim Ferriss and Rick Doblin, but, we're talking about like 2/3 of people cured of PTSD after 1 or 2 doses and a therapeutic setting. And I'm doing it on the 12th of August, up here in the Northern Rivers, with a really fucking, an incredible expert in the field, like a kind of Aussie version of Rick Doblin. I'm really excited about that.
An actual expert in the field. Okay, so it's going to be guided. It's going to be like a set and a setting.
Yeah, and actually, he was explaining to me. There's quite a bit of research that's been done on this. Like, it's been used for over 30 years. MDMA in proper scientific settings by psychologists, and it's been monitored. And in all that time, there hasn't been one negative experience. There hasn't been one flip out, one like psychosis episode. Like psychedelics can kind of trigger that. It can be pretty intense, confronting the ego and all the rest of it. But this hasn't been an issue. Like MDMA is incredibly safe. I'm gonna just question you there a little bit. The thing about MDMA that personally turns me off is the MA part, which stands for methamphetamine. So when I hear methamphetamine, I think, like, I just associate that with, I guess more of those dirtier drugs like speed and, I don't know, cocaine and stuff like that. So that, for me personally, that's the one aspect of it that I'm a bit skeptical about. But then then you mentioned the data and the research is showing otherwise. I guess it's this breaking down of cultural norms. Yeah. I don't know. It's got methamphetamine in the title, but the actual word is methylene dioxymethamphetamine. So it's all one word. I don't know, it's not like it's an ingredient of it. It's just part of the name of the compound, which is one huge word. So, whether there's actual, I would doubt that there's methamphetamine in it. I would say that there's a compound that has the same, half of that word in it. I don't know. These compounds are all only a molecule or whatever it is off of each other anyway. The difference between MDMA and MDA, the tryptophan, is massive, and anyone who's tried both of those substances will attest to that. So, it's definitely not a concern of mine, although, consuming methamphetamine would be a real concern. But, the shit that you can get out there, especially through these therapeutic channels, is it's super clean. And, my mate's texting me in the football time, but I want to miss this call.
Oh, okay. We can start to wrap it up.
Don't be afraid.
I don't want to get in the way of the footy. But listen, it's been so epic. I just want to sort of say one more thing, and maybe people can direct people to this. There's a documentary I watched recently, and it's heavily got this guy in it called Paul Stamets. It's called Fantastic Fungi or Fungi if you're in America. Yeah, and fantastic.
He's got 2 incredible interviews with Joe Rogan, Paul Stamets. He's kind of changed my life in some way.
Same, but I think the thing that came out of that, aside from the psychedelic aspect, that he explains mycelium networks, but basically, which is the nerve center and the brain center of nature. And I just walked away from it. The big thing was nature is so much smarter than us, and it is intelligence and it has an intelligence.
Totally.
Anyway, something to watch if you want.
When I take mushrooms, I've come to, or one theory I've got is that you're tapping into all of planetary history. when you consume that. All of the wisdom and fucking knowledge that exists in the biosphere, in the mycelium, you're absorbing that, and it feels like that, man. When you're on the shit, you're like, wow, like, whoa, like, I know nothing, but I know everything, but like, whoa. And it just kind of destroys your ego in often a painful way and then a really pleasant way. Always ultimately a pleasant way. As painful as it is, it almost always lets you out in a positive moment.
So periods of pain, not the whole time.
Well, the confrontation with the ego is often scary, man. The ego doesn't want to let go control, but it has to in the face of mushrooms. That's the scary part of the ego death. It's so hard, man, because often your ego's been leading you to make shitty choices and treat people like shit and so on and so forth.
But also but isn't it? It's also a protective mechanism, right?
What's it protecting you from?
Well, because, it doesn't the ego, okay, yes, the ego's there to help you problem solve, but also protect you from harm. So it's predicting, it's problem solving, so you are not harmed, not just physically, but emotionally as well.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Disagree?
No, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I disagree, but I'm sure it serves some function. For me, my ego was warped and out of whack just because of the armory that I had to build around myself because of some of the shit that I was exposed to growing up, like domestic violence, poverty, etc. So I can't speak for everyone's ego. I've heard it described as the egos are the keys to the car. You start the car and you choose where to kind of take it from that point on. But they're it's the ignition. It's kind of what gets you going, I guess. But you got to choose the destination. Don't let the ego choose the destination, I guess, necessarily. I don't know. It's a bit fucking intuitive, mate. So.
No, that's epic, and I think it's a good way to end on that, Jed, because I know you want to watch the footy, and I'm so grateful for your time. But my last little segment is I ask all guests to come to the podcast with a cause that they want to support or advocate for. So, what do you got for us today?
Surfers Not Street Children. It's a Durban-based charity run by Tom Hewitt, an old anti-apartheid. He's not old, but he was a former anti-apartheid activist based there in Durban. And Durban was the centre of the kind of bloodshed and rioting and looting recently. And it's one of the most fucked up countries on earth. I've been there 3 times. I've written a bunch of stories about that. I'm in the process of writing one right now. Or putting one to bed about the revolution or the attempted rebellion or whatever you want to call it. And he is just in such a tough spot and doing such an incredible job, getting kids out of the slums, away from sniffing glue and brake fluid and away from whatever other fucking nasty drugs there are there. These kids live in abject poverty. The average South African kid living in the slums experiences 8 traumatic events a year versus 4 across a lifetime for kids in Australia and the UK. Mate, they're in such a tough spot, and he's doing such an incredible job. The kids love him. They love surfing. Mick Fanning is an ambassador. He's worked for him. Jordie Smith, among others. So I would encourage people to connect with them. There's not a people who are more disempowered and impoverished and being ripped off harder than black people in South Africa. It's mind-melting.
Man, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And there's a link to that charity in this episode's show notes. So if you scroll down, you can click on the link and you can go and support that. And thanks so much, Jed, for raising awareness about that. You can find this episode on the terriblehappytalks.com website. The site is under construction, so it's getting revamped, but there is a link to a temporary site there. You can also find this podcast on all the major platforms such as Apple, Spotify, Buzzsprout, Stitcher, and whatever platform you like to listen on. Just subscribe. Now, listen, man, the last thing I've got for you is our friends Jed at Indo Soul are going to send you a pair of shoes as a gift for being on the show. So I got a gift for you, yeah. And Kai Paul and Kyle Parsons are the best dudes.
I know Kai from the days in Indo.
Oh, you know Kai? Yeah. Kai just started helping me out, like literally episode 30. He's just the loveliest dude, and they've just stuck by me. They give every guest a pair of shoes. So I'll have to get your address details and shoe size, Jed, and I'll get that in the mail for you, my brother.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Well, listen, enjoy the footy. Thanks so much. I always thought you were a legend. I love what you do, and now I'm even more convinced that you're an absolute champion.
Man, thanks
for your honesty.
I'm fucking doing my best to be kind to people.
But you're just being real, Jed. Like, seriously, you're so real. And I was wondering if there was going to be a difference between what you are like on your podcast to speaking to you now, and it's the same. You're just telling it how you're seeing it, but it's also based in heavy research. Like, I can tell you're an amazing researcher. So keep doing what you're doing, man. People love you.
Oh, thanks, brother. Appreciate it, man. Likewise. All
right, just stay. I'm going to play the outro music. Here we go. Can you hear that? Is there outro music?
Yeah.
Still going? Is it finished?
No, I can hear it.
I can't hear it.
You can't hear it. You've got to put your volume up.
Wait up. There's one more outro song. You ready?
Parasitic, poisonous, unconscious and irrational. Just ask Steph. They use cultural capital. Irrikanji. When the onshore blows, they're ready to go. Amphibious assault. They'll give you a jolt. Irrikanji.
It's pretty profound lyrics, Jed.
Oh, you missed.
All right, mate.
Some of the shittest ones in there, but good try. Good try.
All right, brother. Have a good night, mate. Thanks for chatting. See you, dude.